That night, my father said he was just stepping out for more ice. The moment the latch clicked, my stepmother slammed a heavy glass ladle onto the table inches from my face. She hissed that I only survived there because she allowed it. I was 20 years old, yet I cowered like a criminal until the door opened again. My father had returned for his wallet, seeing far more than he dared to admit for the next 10 years. My name is Noel Archer, and as I sat at the mahogany dining table in my father's house in the wealthy suburbs of Fairmont, Colorado, I felt less like a daughter and more like a prop in a meticulously staged play. The air in the room was heavy, not with the scent of the roasted lamb Loretta had prepared, but with the suffocating pressure of performance. Everything was too perfect. The crystal wine glasses caught the light of the chandelier just so. The linen napkins were folded into shapes that defied physics, and my stepmother, Loretta, wore a smile that seemed to have been surgically attached to her face for the benefit of the camera lens. To my left, my half-sister Piper was in the middle of her third take of a toast. She held her glass aloft, tilting her head to find her best angle, her ring light casting a circular reflection in her eyes. Her fiancé, Gavin, sat opposite her, holding his phone steady with the grim determination of a war photographer, though the only conflict here was between reality and the curated feed of Piper's TikTok account. I looked down at my own attire. I was still wearing my charcoal gray blazer and the sensible blouse I had worn to work at Northbridge Advisory. I had come straight from the office, exhausted after a 12-hour shift analyzing financial risk models for commercial mergers. I smelled like stale office coffee and subway air, a stark contrast to the lavender and expensive ambition that perfumed this room. I felt like the only person here who actually existed in 3 dimensions, while everyone else was flattening themselves into 2-dimensional images for public consumption. Loretta cleared her throat. It was a delicate sound, but it cut through the low hum of conversation from the assorted aunts and cousins at the far end of the table like a gavel. She picked up a silver spoon and tapped it gently against her flute. The sharp ring silenced the room. Even the cousins stopped chewing. "I have some wonderful news," Loretta announced, her voice pitching up an octave into her hosting register. She placed a hand over Piper's hand, creating a tableau of maternal affection. "We have officially secured the venue." Piper let out a squeal that was only partially rehearsed, bringing her hands to her cheeks. Gavin zoomed in. "The Ice Crown Pavilion," Loretta continued, pausing for effect. "We put the deposit down this afternoon. Piper is going to have her Winter Wonderland wedding." A ripple of gasps went around the table. My stomach turned over. I knew the Ice Crown Pavilion. Everyone in Colorado knew it. It was a glass cathedral perched on a cliffside, famous for hosting celebrity nuptials and corporate retreats for Fortune 500 companies. The base rental fee alone was more than I made in a year. I did the math in my head instantly. An occupational hazard. Between the catering minimums, the mandatory decor packages, and the peak winter season surcharge, they were looking at $250,000, easily. I forced a smile, clapping mechanically along with the rest of the table. I looked at my father, Daniel. He was drinking his scotch a little too quickly, his eyes fixed on the centerpiece rather than his wife's triumphant face. That was my first warning sign. Dad only drank like that when he was trying to numb a guilty conscience. "It is going to be viral," Piper gushed, wiping away a tear that managed not to ruin her mascara. "We already have a hashtag. Gavin hired a documentary crew. They start filming next week." "That is incredible." "Piper," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears, "it is a beautiful venue." Loretta turned her gaze toward me. It was a predator's gaze, masked by the soft lighting. "We are just so blessed," she said, her smile widening to show too many teeth. "And we have to give a special thank you to Noelle." I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. "Me? Why?" Loretta beamed. "Because without her, this wouldn't have been possible. We are so lucky that her trust fund was available to help make this dream a reality." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the blood rushing in my ears. I lowered my fork slowly to the plate. The metal clicked against the china, a harsh sound in the quiet. "Excuse me?" I asked. The words came out quiet. Dangerous. My father finally looked at me. His face flushed. "Now, Noelle," he started, his voice wavering. "It is just a temporary arrangement." I turned my whole body toward him. "What is a temporary arrangement? Dad?" "We had to put down a significant deposit to hold the date," Loretta interjected smoothly, taking control of the narrative before my father could crumble. $70,000. Cash. It was a now or never situation. "Sweetie." The dates were filling up fast. $70,000. I felt the air leave my lungs as if I had been punched. That money was not just numbers on a screen. That was everything my mother had left me. It was the insurance policy against the world she knew I would need. It was the down payment on a house I had been saving for since I was 18. It was my freedom fund. "You took $70,000 from my trust?" I asked, my voice rising. "Without asking me? Without my signature?" "Technically, we did not need your signature," Loretta said, picking up her wineglass and taking a calm sip. "Your father and I remain co-trustees until you turn 30. We are legally allowed to manage the assets as we see fit for the benefit of the family." "For the benefit of the family?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Piper is having a party. That money was for my future." "Don't be selfish." "Noelle," Piper snapped, dropping the sweet sister act instantly. "You weren't using it. It was just sitting there. My wedding is happening now. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event." "It is theft," I said, looking at my father. "Dad, tell me you didn't sign off on this. Tell me you didn't give her my mother's money for an ice sculpture and a venue fee." Daniel looked miserable. He pulled at his collar. "The market has been tight. Noelle, cash flow is a little restricted right now. We fully intend to pay it back." "When?" I demanded. "When will you pay it back?" "Before or after you pay for the documentary crew. Before or after the honeymoon." "You are ruining the mood," Gavin said from across the table. I looked at him and realized with a jolt of horror that he was still holding his phone up. The red recording light was on. He was filming me. "Are you recording this?" I asked, pointing a shaking finger at the lens. "Documentation," Gavin said with a smirk. "If you are going to be hysterical, people should see the truth. They should see that while Piper is trying to celebrate love, her bitter older sister is screaming about money. If I post this, everyone will see who the real selfish one is." I looked around the table. The aunts were looking at their plates. The cousins were checking their phones. My father was staring into his glass. Loretta was watching me with that same cold, calculated look she had worn since the day she moved in. I was alone. I was completely alone in a room full of people who shared my DNA. "I am not the one who is selfish," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. "I am the only one here who works for a living. I am the only one who understands that $70,000 is not just a line item on a party budget. It is years of security." "Oh. Stop being dramatic," Loretta said, waving a hand dismissively. "You have a good job. You can afford to wait. We are a family. We help each other. Or have you forgotten that?" I grabbed my purse from the back of the chair. "I have not forgotten anything. Loretta, and neither have you. I want that money back in the account by Monday, or I'm calling a lawyer." I turned and walked toward the archway that led to the hall. I needed to get out. I needed fresh air. I needed to scream. "Noelle, wait," my father called out, half rising from his chair. But he didn't move his feet. He stayed anchored to his spot, anchored to her. I didn't stop. I marched into the foyer, my heels clicking on the marble. I was reaching for the heavy front door when I heard the click of heels behind me. Faster, sharper steps. Loretta caught the door before I could open it. She slammed her hand against the wood, pinning it shut. For a woman who spent her days at the spa, she was terrifyingly strong. "Get out of my way," I said, not looking at her. "You will not call a lawyer," she whispered. Her voice was low, devoid of the sugary sweetness she used for the guests. "Watch me," I said, meeting her eyes. "If you make this a legal issue, if you embarrass Piper or drag this family's name through the mud, I will ruin you. Loretta hissed. You already stole my money. What else can you do? She leaned in close, smelling of expensive wine and malice. I will tell them the truth about you. Noelle, I will tell everyone what really happened that night 10 years ago. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. I will tell them how unstable you were. She continued, smiling now. I will tell them how you attacked your little sister because you were jealous of her birthday. I will tell them how I had to physically restrain you until your father got home. I will paint a picture of a violent, mentally ill woman who has been a burden on us for a decade. And who do you think they will believe? The grieving stepmother trying to hold a family together? Or the angry spinster who sues her own father? My hands were shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists to hide it. The memory of that night washed over me. The cold kitchen, the pain in my arm, the injustice that had burned a hole in my stomach for 10 years. You are a monster, I whispered. And you are a guest in this family, she replied, stepping back and smoothing her dress. Remember that. She opened the door for me, gesturing to the dark driveway with a mockingly polite sweep of her arm. Drive safe, sweetie. I walked out into the cool Colorado night, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. I didn't look back at the house. I got into my sedan, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I was done crying. Loretta thought she had won. She thought she had played the ultimate trump card. But as I started the engine, looking at the dashboard clock that read 9:30 in the evening, I realized something. She had just admitted that it was a war, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to surrender just to keep the peace. I was going to get my $70,000 back, and then I was going to take everything else. The hum of the engine on the highway faded into the background, replaced by the phantom sound of a refrigerator compressor and the ticking of a wall clock from 10 years ago. My hands on the steering wheel were no longer the hands of a 30-year-old financial risk analyst. They felt smaller, younger, and trembling with a confusion I had not known how to articulate back then. I was 20 years old, a sophomore in college, home for the semester to save on room and board. I thought I was an adult. I thought I was safe. That night was the 13th birthday of my half-sister, Piper. The house had been vibrating with manic energy all day. There was no Cinderella cruelty here, no hidden bruises or locked cupboards. Piper was the princess of the county. She sat at the head of the table, surrounded by piles of wrapping paper, clutching a brand new smartphone that cost more than my textbooks for the entire year. We had spent the last hour recording videos for her social media, a performance of domestic bliss that required take after take until the lighting was perfect. Loretta was the conductor of this orchestra. She moved through the kitchen with a terrifying grace, refilling drinks, fluffing pillows, and laughing at my father's jokes with a brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. To an outsider, she was the perfect mother and the perfect wife, but I had learned to read the microclimates of her moods. I saw the way her jaw tightened when Piper laughed too loudly. I saw the way her eyes snapped to the clock every time my father took too long to tell a story. Then came the catalyst. "We are out of ice, Daniel," Loretta said. She didn't shout, but the sentence cut through the room like a wire. "We cannot serve the sparkling cider warm." My father, eager to be useful, eager to keep the peace, jumped up. "I will run to the gas station. Be back in 10 minutes. He grabbed his keys. He kissed Loretta on the cheek. He winked at Piper. Then, the front door opened and closed. The latch clicked. That sound, that distinct, mechanical click of the deadbolt sliding home, it was the sound of a safety net being pulled away. For a moment, the room held its breath. Piper was busy setting up her new phone, oblivious to the shift in atmospheric pressure. I was standing by the sink, rinsing plates. Loretta stood by the island, staring at the closed door. Her smile dropped off her face like wet clay sliding off a wall. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was an instant vanish. "Piper, honey, be careful with that cake," Loretta said. Her voice was flat. Piper was reaching across the counter for the oversized slice of chocolate gâteau left on the serving platter. She was clumsy in the way 13-year-old girls are, all elbows and knees growing faster than her proprioception could keep up. Her arm knocked against the heavy ceramic platter. It happened in slow motion. The platter tipped. Gravity took over. The cake, rich with ganache and heavy cream, slid off the edge and splattered onto the pristine travertine floor. Dark brown icing exploded across the beige tiles, hitting the hem of Loretta's white linen trousers. Piper gasped, freezing in place. "Oh my God. Mom, I am so sorry." The room went deadly silent. I reached for a roll of paper towels, stepping forward instinctively to help. "It is okay." "Piper," I said, trying to diffuse the tension that was rapidly sucking the oxygen out of the room. "It is just cake. We can clean it up." "You pushed her," Loretta whispered. I stopped. The paper towel roll was suspended in my hand. "Excuse me?" Loretta turned her head slowly toward me. Her eyes were wide, but they were devoid of any warmth. They were black holes. "You pushed her arm. I saw you. Noelle. You were jealous that she got the first slice. You were jealous of her phone." I stared at her, my mouth slightly open. I was 20 years old. I was a grown woman. The accusation was so childish, so absurd, that I almost laughed. "Loretta." I was standing 5 feet away by the sink. I did not touch her. "Don't you lie to me," she hissed. The volume of her voice remained low, which made it infinitely more terrifying than a scream. "Piper, tell her," I said, looking at my sister. "Tell her I didn't touch you." Piper looked at her mother, then at the floor. She was 13, but she knew the survival code of this house better than I did. She said nothing. She just started to cry. Soft, terrified whimpers. "See what you have done?" Loretta's voice rose, cracking with a manufactured hysteria. "You made her cry on her birthday." She closed the distance between us in 2 strides, before I could process that she was actually coming for me. Her hand shot out and clamped around my upper arm. Her fingers were like steel bands. Her nails, perfectly manicured into sharp ovals, dug into my bicep through the fabric of my cotton shirt. "Loretta, let go," I said, my voice dropping. I was not a child to be disciplined. I was an adult, but instinct is a powerful thing. When a parent figure attacks, the inner child freezes. She didn't let go. Instead, she shoved me backward. I stumbled, my lower back slamming hard against the granite edge of the counters. The pain was sharp and immediate, stealing my breath. "You think you are so special because you went off to college?" She spat, her face inches from mine. I could smell the expensive Chardonnay on her breath. "You are nothing in this house. You only exist here because I allow it. You are a guest, a parasite." I grabbed her wrist, trying to pry her fingers off my arm. "Stop it. You are crazy." That was the wrong word. Loretta's other hand moved. It wasn't a theatrical, movie star slap. It was a fast, brutal backhand that caught me across the cheekbone. The sound was a wet, meaty crack that echoed off the high ceilings. My head snapped to the side. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. I didn't scream. I didn't fight back. I stood there, stunned into absolute immobility, my hand coming up to touch my stinging cheek. I stared at her, unable to comprehend that this woman, who played tennis at the club and organized charity galas, had just struck me in the face. She wasn't done. In her rage, she swept her arm across the counter to clear the space, as if my presence had contaminated the air. A tray of crystal stemware, the good crystal, used for the toast, went flying. The crash was catastrophic. Glass shattered everywhere, shards skittering across the floor, mixing with the ruined cake. And then, the sound of the front door opening. The click of the latch. My father walked in. He was patting his pockets, a sheepish smile on his face. I forgot my wallet. He started to say, "I cannot buy the ice without—" He stopped. The scene before him was a tableau of violence. I was pressed against the counter, clutching my face, my hair messy, tears of shock welling in my eyes. Piper was sobbing in the corner. The floor was a disaster zone of glass and chocolate, and Loretta was standing over me, her chest heaving, her hand still raised. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered aggression. For 1 second, one single, solitary second, Daniel Archer saw the truth. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the color drain from his face. I saw the horror of a man realizing he has married a monster. He looked at the red mark blooming on my cheek. He looked at Loretta's clawed hand. There was no ambiguity here. He had walked in on an assault. "Dad," I choked out, taking a step toward him. But the moment I spoke, the spell broke. Loretta spun around. Her face transformed instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a crumbling, weeping fragility. She brought her hands to her face, sobbing. "Oh, Daniel, thank God you are back." She ran to him, stepping over the glass, throwing herself into his arms. "What happened?" my father asked, his voice shaking. He looked at me, but he wasn't really seeing me anymore. He was looking for an exit ramp. He was looking for an explanation that didn't require him to be a hero. Noelle just snapped. Loretta wailed into his shirt. Piper dropped the cake by accident, and Noelle just went crazy. She started screaming that we loved Piper more, and she threw the glasses. I tried to stop her. I tried to hold her back, but she was so strong. "Daniel, she hit me." I stood there, my blood running cold. The lie was so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that I couldn't even form the words to refute it. I looked at my father. I waited for him to push her away. I waited for him to say, "I saw you standing over her. I saw her fear." "Noelle," my father said, "he didn't come to me. He stayed by the door, holding his wife." "That is a lie," I said. My voice was trembling. "She hit me. Dad, she pushed me. Look at my face." Loretta pulled back from him, tears streaming down her flawless makeup. "Look at what she did to the party. Daniel, she is trying to ruin Piper's birthday because she is miserable." My father looked at the broken glass. He looked at Piper, who was too terrified to speak. Then he looked at me, and I saw the light in his eyes die. He knew, deep down, in the part of his brain that wasn't a coward, he knew. He had seen her hand raised, but acknowledging that meant blowing up his life. It meant divorce. It meant admitting he had failed me. It meant confronting the woman who controlled his social calendar and his home. So he chose the path of least resistance. "Noelle," he said, his voice heavy with a fake, paternal disappointment. "Go to your room." "What?" I whispered. "We will talk about this in the morning when you have calmed down," he said, refusing to meet my eyes. He turned his attention to Loretta, stroking her hair. "It is okay. Honey, I am here. We will clean it up." I stood there for 5 heartbeats. The injustice of it felt like a physical weight, crushing my lungs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. But I saw the set of his shoulders. He had made his choice. He had chosen the lie because the truth was too expensive. I walked past them. I walked through the shards of glass in my socks, feeling the sharp pricks against my soles. But the pain didn't register. I walked past my father, who was busy inspecting Loretta's hands for imaginary injuries. I went upstairs to my room and locked the door. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched my cheek. It was throbbing, but the bruise on my face was nothing compared to the clarity that was settling in my mind. That night, I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned that truth does not matter in the Archer household. I learned that my father's love was conditional on my silence, and I learned that if I was ever hit, physically or metaphorically, it would always be my fault for standing in the way of their happiness. I sat there in the dark, listening to the vacuum cleaner running downstairs as they erased the evidence, and I realized that the father I loved had not just gone out for ice. He had left the building entirely, and he was never coming back. My apartment in the working-class district of Fairmont was a stark contrast to the marble mausoleum I had just fled. It was a third-floor walk-up with a radiator that clanked like a dying engine and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. I paid the rent with money I earned. I bought the furniture with checks I signed. There were no strings attached to the air I breathed here. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off my heels, my feet throbbing. The silence of the apartment should have been comforting, but it was immediately shattered by the relentless buzzing of my phone. It had been vibrating against my hip the entire drive home, a frantic, rhythmic pulse that felt like a warning signal. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen was lit up with notifications: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, text messages. I sank onto my beige sofa, the one with the coffee stain on the armrest that I hadn't had time to clean, and unlocked the screen. The first thing I saw was a notification that Piper had added to her story. My thumb hovered over the circle. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was emotional self-harm, but I tapped it anyway. The screen filled with a black and white photo of Piper wiping a tear from her eye. It was artfully blurry, the kind of candid shot that took 5 tries to get right. A sad, acoustic cover of a pop song played in the background. The caption was written in a delicate white font. "Heartbroken tonight. It hurts when the people who are supposed to be your blood choose money over your happiness. I guess some people just want to see you fail. Please send good vibes. We are trying to save the wedding." It was a masterclass in vague booking. She hadn't named me, but she didn't have to. The court of public opinion was already in session, and the verdict was swift. I scrolled through the replies and comments that were pouring in. "Stay strong. Queen, jealousy is a disease. Imagine trying to ruin your little sister's big day over cash. Some people are so miserable. If she didn't want to share, she shouldn't have let your parents pay for her whole life. Ungrateful." I stared at that last comment, my vision blurring with rage. Let your parents pay for her whole life. The rewriting of history had already begun. The narrative was being edited in real time. The internet didn't know that I worked double shifts at the campus library and waited tables at a diner on weekends to pay for my tuition. They didn't know I drove a 10-year-old car so I wouldn't have to ask Daniel for gas money. In Loretta's version of the world, I was the spoiled leech, and they were the benevolent saints who had finally been pushed too far. My phone pinged again, a text from Aunt Sarah, my father's sister. "Noelle, I am so disappointed. After everything Loretta has done for you, she took you in. She raised you. You need to apologize and fix this before you break your father's heart." I threw the phone onto the cushion next to me as if it were burning hot. She took you in, as if I were a stray dog, as if that house wasn't mine before it was hers. They remembered the times Loretta bought me a dress for Easter. They conveniently forgot the times she mocked my weight, critiqued my career choices, or the way she would accidentally leave me out of family group chats for weeks at a time. The phone started ringing. The screen flashed. Dad. I stared at it. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. I wanted to crawl under a blanket and pretend I didn't exist. But hiding was what the 20-year-old Noelle would have done. The 30-year-old risk analyst picked up the phone. "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "Noelle." His voice was tight, low. "You need to take down whatever legal threats you made, now." I didn't make threats. "Dad, I stated facts. You stole $70,000 from me." "We borrowed it," he snapped. The stress was fraying his usual passive demeanor. "And now you have upset Piper so much she cannot stop crying. Gavin is talking about canceling the videographer because they are worried about the budget if we have to pay you back immediately. Do you have any idea how selfish you look?" "I am not the one who spent someone else's money on an ice castle," I said, leaning back against the sofa cushions. "Listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "If you pursue this, if you file any paperwork, I will have the family lawyer rewrite the will tomorrow morning. You will be cut out. Noelle, completely, not a dime." I almost laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Dad, do you really think there is going to be anything left in the will by the time Loretta and Piper are done?" There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, guilty silence. I had struck a nerve. "You are making a mistake," he said finally, his tone shifting from angry to pitying. "You are going to isolate yourself. When this is over, people will not remember the money. They will just remember that you were the daughter who sued her own father. You will be a pariah. Noelle, is $70,000 worth losing your family? Is $70,000 worth losing your daughter?" I asked quietly. He hung up. The disconnection tone buzzed in my ear. I lowered the phone, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. He had made his position clear. The money was more important than my trust. The image of the perfect family was more important than the reality of his relationship with me. I sat there in the dim light of my living room, feeling the walls closing in. It wasn't just the money, it was the erasure. All those years I had spent trying to be good enough, driving Dad to his physical therapy appointments when Loretta was too busy at the club, picking Piper up from school when she missed the bus, sitting by Dad's bedside after his surgery. It was all being deleted, in their story. I was just a burden, a bitter, solitary figure who took and never gave back. My phone chimed again, a message from Loretta. No text, just an image. It was a screenshot of an old text conversation between Piper and me from 5 years ago. Piper had been crying about a breakup, and I had taken her shopping to cheer her up. The text from me read, "Don't worry about the price tag. Kiddo, what is mine is yours. I've always got your back." Loretta had cropped out the context. She had cropped out the date. Now, it just looked like a binding promise, a blanket statement of financial submission. It was a threat. "I have receipts," she was saying. "I can twist anything you have ever said." I felt a wave of nausea. I was being buried under an avalanche of half-truths and manipulated context. I needed to sleep. I needed to turn off the phone and the world. But the world wasn't done with me. The next morning, I arrived at Northbridge Advisory 10 minutes early. As I always did, I needed the routine. I needed the cold, hard logic of numbers and spreadsheets to ground me. But as soon as I swiped my badge at the turnstile, the receptionist gave me a look, a mix of curiosity and pity, that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Henderson wants to see you in his office," she said, immediately. My stomach dropped. Mr. Henderson was the regional director. He didn't call people in for casual chats at 8 in the morning. I walked to his office, my heels clicking on the industrial carpet. I knocked and entered. Mr. Henderson was sitting behind his desk, looking at a printout. He was a stern man, fair but rigorous, the kind of person who valued discretion above all else. "Sit down. Noelle," he said, gesturing to the chair. I sat, placing my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. "Is something wrong with the quarterly risk assessment?" I asked. He slid the paper across the desk toward me. "It is not about your work. This was sent to the general HR inbox and CC'd to me at 2 in the morning. I looked at the paper. It was an email. The sender was Gavin Miller. Subject: Concern regarding Noelle Archer. To whom it may concern. I am writing to you as a concerned family member regarding your employee, Noelle Archer. It has come to our attention that Noelle is currently going through a severe mental health crisis. She has been exhibiting erratic, aggressive behavior and paranoid delusions regarding family finances. We are worried that her instability might affect her professional judgment, especially given the sensitive nature of the financial data she handles. We are doing our best to get her help, but we felt it was responsible to inform her employer so that you can take appropriate measures to protect your clients." I read it twice. The words swam before my eyes. Paranoid delusions, erratic behavior. Gavin, that smug, camera-obsessed parasite, had tried to nuke my career. He knew he couldn't win the argument about the money, so he was trying to destroy my credibility. If I lost my job, I would lose the ability to hire a lawyer. I would be defenseless. I looked up at Mr. Henderson. "This is a lie," I said, my voice firm despite the panic fluttering in my throat. "This is retaliation. My family and I are in a dispute over a trust fund they misappropriated. They are trying to intimidate me." Mr. Henderson studied me over his glasses. He was a man who dealt in facts, not drama. He leaned back in his chair. "I know. Noelle," he said. I blinked. "You do?" He tapped the paper. "This email reads like a classic smear campaign. Paranoid delusions? You are the most level-headed analyst on my floor. Your work is impeccable. And frankly, people who are genuinely concerned about a relative's mental health do not email their boss at 2 in the morning using corporate buzzwords." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. "So, I am not fired?" "No," he said, "but Noelle, you need to listen to me." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "These people, your family, they play dirty. They are bringing your personal life into this office. I can ignore one email, but if they start picketing the lobby or flooding our social media, HR will get nervous. Corporate does not like noise." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "If you are going to fight them, do not fight them on TikTok. Do not fight them in the comments section. Fight them on paper. Get a lawyer. Get a paper trail. Keep your hands clean and your head down at work. If you engage with them publicly, you give credibility to their claim that you are unstable. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "Thank you, sir." I walked back to my cubicle, my legs feeling like jelly. I sat down and logged into my bank account. I needed to know where I stood. I stared at the screen. The balance in my personal savings account was $12,400. It was everything I had managed to scrape together after rent, bills, and the cost of living. It was my emergency fund, my "one day I will buy a condo" fund. In the grand scheme of legal battles, it was peanuts. A good lawyer would burn through that in a month. But it was mine. Loretta couldn't touch it. Daniel couldn't sign it away. I looked at the number, and then I looked at the printed copy of Gavin's email that I had taken from Mr. Henderson's office. They had crossed a line. They weren't just greedy. They were trying to dismantle me. They wanted to strip me of my money, my reputation, and my livelihood, just to fund a winter gala for a girl who had never worked a day in her life. If I stayed silent, if I let them keep the money to keep the peace, this would never end. They would rewrite my life until I was nothing but a footnote in their glamorous story. The crazy sister, the burden. I closed the browser tab. I picked up my phone. I didn't open Instagram. I didn't open TikTok. I opened Google and typed in, "lawyers specializing in trust fund fraud, Colorado." I wasn't going to play their game. I wasn't going to be a character in Piper's reality show. I was going to be the producer of their downfall. I clicked search. The office of Carmen Hale was not located in a gleaming glass tower like Northbridge Advisory. It was tucked away in a converted brownstone in downtown Denver. The kind of building with creaky floorboards and the smell of old paper and serious intent. Carmen herself was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper intellect. She did not offer me tea or sympathy. She offered me a retainer agreement. I looked at the check I had just written, $5,000. It was nearly half of my remaining savings. Handing it over felt like physically cutting off a limb. But when I looked at Carmen's eyes that had seen every variation of familial greed imaginable, I knew it was the only way to survive. She took the check without blinking. Then she opened the file I had brought her. It contained the few trust statements I had managed to download before my access was suspiciously revoked 24 hours ago. "You said the total unauthorized withdrawal was $70,000? Carmen asked, her voice raspy, like she smoked too much or argued too loud. "Yes," I said. "They claimed it was a loan for a venue deposit." Carmen flipped through the pages, her highlighter moving like a scalpel. It wasn't one lump sum. "Noelle, look here." She turned the ledger toward me. I squinted at the lines she had marked in yellow. $9,500 on September 3rd. $9,000 on September 10th. $8,500 on September 17th. "They structured it," Carmen said flatly. "They kept every individual transfer under $10,000. "Why?" I asked. "To avoid the automatic federal reporting trigger," she explained. "Banks have to report any transaction over $10,000 to the IRS. By breaking it up like this, they flew under the radar. This wasn't a panic move. Noelle, this wasn't a father making a desperate mistake to help a daughter. This was calculated. This is evidence of intent to conceal." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Loretta. This had Loretta's fingerprints all over it. "And this," Carmen said, pulling out a printed email from the trust management firm, a document she had subpoenaed within hours of my initial call. "This is the internal compliance note." I read the text. Trustee Daniel Archer and co-trustee Loretta Archer confirmed via teleconference that beneficiary Noelle Archer has given verbal consent for these disbursements as a gift to her sister. A signed waiver is to be provided before the beneficiary turns 30. Verbal consent, I repeated, the room spinning slightly. They told the bank I agreed to it? They lied to the bank, Carmen corrected. And see the email chain? She tapped a stack of papers. Every single instruction came from Loretta's email address. Loretta authorized the transfer. Loretta confirmed the verbal consent. Loretta pushed for the expedited processing. And my father? I asked, dreading the answer. Carmen pointed to the CC line on every email. Daniel, Archer@gmail.com. He was copied on everything, she said. He never replied. He never objected. He just watched it happen in his inbox. I sat back in the leather chair, staring at the ceiling. I had always told myself that my father was weak, that he was bullied by Loretta. But this was not weakness. This was complicity. He had watched her rob me, email by email, and said nothing. We need more, Carmen said, interrupting my spiral. To prove the pattern of abuse, we need to show that this isn't just about money. You mentioned an incident 10 years ago, the night he went for ice. I nodded, but it is just my word against theirs. Is it? Carmen asked. You said he has a home server, a cloud backup for the family photos and videos? He does, I said, but I don't have the password anymore. Did you have a computer back then? A laptop you took to college? Yes, I said, frowning. I still have it. It is an old brick of a machine, sitting in a box in my closet. Check it, she said. Sometimes, those old home networks automatically synced files to local drives if you were connected to the Wi-Fi. It is a long shot, but check it. I went home that night and dug through the back of my closet until I found the dusty cardboard box labeled college. Inside was my old laptop, heavy and thick. I plugged it in, praying it would still boot up. It groaned, the fan whirring like a jet engine, but the screen flickered to life. I spent 3 hours combing through the folders, essays on macroeconomics, photos of campus parties, and then, deep in a folder named Home Backup that I must have inadvertently synced during that winter break, I found a subfolder labeled Kitchen Cam Security. My heart hammered against my ribs. My father had installed a camera in the kitchen a month before Piper's 13th birthday, because we had a pest problem and he wanted to see where the mice were coming from. I had completely forgotten about it. There was one file, just one. The timestamp read, October 14th, 2014, 8:42 p.m. My hands shook as I clicked play. The video was grainy and black and white, but the image was unmistakable. It was the kitchen. I saw myself, younger, thinner, standing by the sink. I saw Loretta. I watched, holding my breath, as the scene I had replayed in my nightmares unfolded on the screen. I saw Piper drop the cake. I saw Loretta lunge. The video had no sound, but the violence was louder than any scream. I watched Loretta grab my arm. I watched her shove me into the granite counter. I saw my head snap back. I saw the sheer force of the backhand slap that sent the crystal glasses flying. It was real. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't crazy. But then, the video did something strange. In my memory, the door opened right after the glasses broke. In the video, I saw the glasses shatter. I saw Loretta standing over me, her chest heaving. I saw her look toward the door. And then the video cut to black. The file ended. I checked the timestamp. It ended exactly 3 seconds before my father walked into the frame. I stared at the screen, confused. Why would it stop there? And then it hit me. The realization was so cold it made my teeth ache. This wasn't a raw feed. This was a clip. Someone had accessed the original footage. Someone had trimmed it. Someone had cut out the moment of entry. The moment where Daniel Archer walked in and saw his wife assaulting his daughter. Only one person had admin access to that system. My father. He hadn't just ignored the violence. He had seen the footage. He had gone into the system, likely that very night while I was crying in my room, and he had edited it. He had deleted the full recording to protect Loretta, but he had kept this clipped version. Why? Insurance? Leverage in case she ever turned on him? He had held on to proof of my abuse for 10 years, hidden on a hard drive, and he had never once used it to defend me. He let me believe it was my word against hers. He let me doubt my own reality. I pulled out my phone and called Carmen. It was 11 at night. "I found something," I said. My voice sounded dead. "Send it to me," she said instantly. 2 days later, Carmen sent the demand letter. It was brutal, precise, and terrifying. It included the forensic accounting of the structured withdrawals. It included the proof of the fake verbal consent. And it included a screenshot of the video file. Just a single frame of Loretta's hand making contact with my face. The letter gave them 48 hours to return the full $70,000 plus interest, or we would file a civil suit and forward the evidence to the district attorney's office for criminal fraud charges. But Carmen didn't stop there. Without telling them, she quietly filed a suspicious activity report with the Colorado Division of Banking and the state's Financial Investigation Unit. "If they pay, we drop the lawsuit," Carmen had told me. But the state? Once the state sees financial elder abuse or trust fraud, they don't stop just because the family makes up. The train has left the station. The response from my family was immediate. My phone rang while I was at my desk at Northbridge. It was my father. I walked to the stairwell to answer. "Noelle, please," his voice was a ragged whisper. "You have to stop this. You sent a letter to the lawyer?" "I sent a letter to the trustees. Dad, that's you." "We can fix this," he begged. "We can work out a payment plan. But you cannot accuse Loretta of fraud. It will destroy her reputation. She is on the board of the charity gala. If this gets out..." "Then she shouldn't have stolen my money," I said. "I didn't know. Noelle, I swear," he cried out. I let her handle the accounts. I didn't look at the details. I just signed where she told me to sign." And there it was, the defense of a coward. "You were copied on every email." "Dad," I said, my voice echoing in the concrete stairwell, "and I know about the video." The line went dead silent. "What video?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The kitchen camera," I said, "October 14th, 2014, the one you edited, the one you kept." "Noelle, listen. You saw her hit me," I said. "You saw it, and you deleted the proof. You let me live in that house for years thinking I was crazy. You let her tell everyone I was the violent one. I was trying to keep the family together," he whispered. "It was a mistake. I just wanted peace." "Peace for you," I said, "not for me." "Please, Noelle, don't do this. If the authorities get involved, I could lose my license. I could lose everything. I am your father." I closed my eyes. I remembered the man who taught me how to ride a bike. I remembered the man who used to make me pancakes on Sundays. But that man had died a long time ago. The man on the phone was just an accomplice. "You have 48 hours to wire the money." "Dad." I hung up. I stood there in the cold stairwell, gripping the railing. I realized then that the sting of Loretta's slap was nothing compared to this. A slap was a moment of pain, but this silence, this 10-year campaign of looking the other way, this was a soul-deep rot. My father hadn't just gone for ice. He had frozen his heart to survive his marriage, and he had used me as the fuel to keep himself warm. I walked back into the office. I had work to do, and for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I was just waiting for the clock to run out. Amidst the suffocating legal warfare and the barrage of digital hate from my own family, Jace Nolan was the only quiet place in my world. To Loretta and Piper, he was a punchline. To my father, he was an embarrassment. They looked at his calloused hands, his flannel shirts ingrained with fine dust, and his rusted Ford F-150 pickup truck, and they saw failure. They saw a man who worked with his hands because he presumably lacked the intellect to work with his head. Loretta loved to make dig at him whenever we crossed paths in town. "Oh, look, Noelle," she would say, her voice dripping with faux pity. "Here comes your lumberjack. I suppose it is charming, in a rustic sort of way. Do you think he can afford to take you to McDonald's for your anniversary?" Piper was even more blunt, On her TikTok, she had made a video comparing wedding aesthetics. On one side was her vision board for the Ice Crown Pavilion: white roses, ice sculptures, imported silk. On the other side was a stock photo of a muddy barn with the caption, "Some people are happy with a backyard BBQ wedding, and that is so brave of them." They didn't know Jace. They didn't know that the smell of cedar and pine that clung to his skin was the most grounding scent I had ever known. They didn't know that when I shook with rage after reading another one of Gavin's smear emails, Jace was the one who held my hands steady, his palms rough and warm, and told me exactly what to do. "Don't reply," he would say, his voice low and calm, sitting on the tailgate of his truck while I paced the parking lot of my apartment complex. "Every time you reply, you give them content. You give them a villain to edit. Starve them. Noelle, save the fight for the courtroom. Keep every email. Screenshot every text. Make backups of the backups." He thought like a strategist, which I always attributed to him being protective. But lately, as the pressure from my family mounted, I began to notice things that didn't quite fit the narrative of the simple carpenter running a small custom furniture shop. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. I had left work early to drop off some paperwork at Carmen's office and decided to swing by Jace's workshop on the outskirts of town. It was a converted warehouse, filled with the scream of table saws and the smell of varnish. Jace was at the back, bent over a massive slab of black walnut. He was sanding the grain by hand, his movements rhythmic and precise. He wore safety goggles and a tattered gray t-shirt. He didn't hear me approach over the noise of the ventilation system. I watched him for a moment, feeling that rare sense of safety. Then, he reached up to wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. His work glove had slipped down slightly, and the sleeve of his t-shirt rode up. Glinting in the harsh fluorescent light of the shop was a watch. I froze. I worked in risk management. I spent my days analyzing the assets of high-net-worth individuals. I knew what money looked like. Even when it was being whispered, the watch on Jace's wrist wasn't a sturdy Casio or a practical Garmin. It was a Patek Philippe Calatrava, vintage, likely from the 1950s. It was understated, with a leather strap that looked worn, but the casing was 18-karat gold, and the craftsmanship was unmistakable. That was a $30,000 watch, minimum. He was sanding a table while wearing a watch that cost more than his truck. Jace turned then. Sensing my presence, he saw me, and for a split second, I saw his eyes dart to his own wrist, in a motion so fluid it looked natural. He tugged his glove back up, covering the gold. "Hey," he said, shutting off the sander. The silence that rushed in was deafening. "You are early." I stared at his wrist. "Nice watch," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He shrugged, picking up a rag to wipe his hands. "Old thing. Belonged to my grandfather. Probably a knockoff. But I like the weight of it." He smiled, that easy, lopsided grin that usually melted my defenses. But for the first time, the math didn't add up in my head. Jace drove a truck that needed a screwdriver to start the ignition. He lived in a loft above the shop. He complained about the price of lumber. A man who wears a Patek to sand wood isn't just sentimental. He is careless with wealth because he is used to it. I let it go. I was too exhausted from the fight with Loretta to start an interrogation with the only person on my side. But the seed of doubt had been planted. 2 days later, we agreed to meet at Washington Park for a walk before dinner. I arrived 20 minutes early. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. I saw Jace sitting on a bench near the lake. He wasn't wearing his usual flannel. He had on a dark navy sweater that fit him perfectly. Too perfectly. It was cashmere. I could tell by the way the fabric draped. He was on the phone. His posture was different. He wasn't slouching. His spine was rigid, his free hand chopping the air as he spoke. I approached quietly, my sneakers making no sound on the grass. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the tone of his voice stopped me dead. It wasn't the soft, rumbling baritone he used with me. It was sharp, clipped, authoritative. "The cap rate is unacceptable at 6%, Jace was saying into the phone. Tell them we are not interested in the operational liabilities unless they clear the lien on the back end. And I want the RevPAR data for the last 5 winters, not just the projected numbers. If they pad the occupancy rates again, we walk. I stood behind a large oak tree, my heart pounding. RevPAR, cap rate, lien clearance. These weren't carpentry terms. These were the terms of high-level commercial real estate acquisition. Jace listened for a moment, then cut the other person off. I don't care who the current management is. The asset is distressed. We are buying the location, not the brand. Get the acquisition clauses ready. I want the deal signed before the snow hits. He hung up and slipped the phone into his pocket. He sat there for a moment, rolling his neck, looking like a man carrying the weight of an empire, not a table. Jace? I stepped out from behind the tree. He jumped, his body flinching as if he had been caught holding a weapon. He spun around, and I watched the transformation happen in real time. The sharp lines of his face softened. The shoulders slumped back into their relaxed curve. The shark became the golden retriever. "Noelle," he said, standing up. "I didn't hear you walk up." "Who were you talking to?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "My brother," he said. "He's trying to flip a house in Denver. He gets in over his head with the contracts, so I help him read the fine print sometimes. You know me. I like to pretend I'm a lawyer." He laughed, reaching out to hug me, but I didn't step into his embrace. "You were talking about RevPAR. Jace, revenue per available room. That is hotel metrics, not house flipping." He stopped, his arms dropping to his sides. He looked at me, really looked at me, calculating how much I knew. "My brother is ambitious," he said smoothly. "He is looking at a small motel. It is a mess. I was just repeating what I read online." It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. A man doesn't accidentally use the term acquisition clauses with that kind of authority because he read a blog post. "Why are you lying to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am not lying." "Noelle," he said, stepping closer, his eyes pleading. "I am just complicated. Look, my family has some business stuff. I stay out of it mostly. I chose the shop. I chose the wood. That is who I am. That is the part of me that matters." He took my hand. His palm was still rough, still calloused. The physical evidence of his labor was real, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding the hand of a man wearing a costume. I let him lead me to dinner. We ate burgers at a dive bar, and he made me laugh about a customer who wanted a table made entirely of epoxy resin. He was Jace. He was my Jace. But later that night, back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the terms distressed asset and acquisition bouncing around my skull. My phone pinged at 1 a.m. It wasn't a text from Jace. It was an email. I opened it. The sender was anonymous source 882. No subject line. Inside was a single PDF attachment. I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. I clicked the file. It was a leaked internal memo, stamped with the watermark confidential. The header read, "Project Summit, Acquisition of Ice Crown Pavilion." My breath hitched. Ice Crown Pavilion, the venue, the place where Loretta had buried my mother's money. I scanned the document. It was a purchase agreement draft. The current owners of the pavilion were facing bankruptcy, something Loretta clearly didn't know, or she wouldn't have put down a $70,000 deposit that was likely non-refundable. But it was the buyer's name that made the room spin. Acquiring entity, Northern Summit Properties. I had never heard of Northern Summit Properties. I quickly opened a new tab and searched for the company. It was a holding company registered in Delaware. A ghost. No website. No public face. But then I looked back at the email. The acquisition timeline mentioned a due diligence period ending in 2 weeks. It mentioned renegotiating all existing vendor contracts. It mentioned RevPAR analysis. And then I remembered the logo on the invoices at Jace's workshop. It was a simple mountain peak. Northern Summit. I put the phone down on the nightstand. My hands were cold. Jace wasn't just a guy who knew about hotels. Jace was buying the Ice Crown Pavilion. The man who drove a rusted truck and let my family mock him for being poor was secretly negotiating to buy the very ground they were standing on. Why? Was he doing this for me? Was this some grand Count of Monte Cristo revenge plot? Or was I just a convenient source of intel? Had he gotten close to me to find out about the Archers' involvement with the venue? No, that didn't make sense. We'd been dating for 8 months. The wedding venue drama was new. He was rich. That was clear. He was powerful. That was becoming obvious. And he was hiding it from me. I thought about the way he told me to document everything, keep the receipts. Was he coaching me legally? Or was he gathering his own due diligence for the acquisition? I looked at the empty side of my bed. I felt a different kind of betrayal than the one with my father. My father's betrayal was born of weakness. Jace's betrayal, if that is what this was born of strength. It was a strategic omission. I picked up the phone again and looked at the picture of Jace I had as my wallpaper. He was smiling, covered in dust, holding a coffee cup. "Who are you?" I whispered to the screen. I could have called him. I could have driven over to the workshop and demanded the truth about the Patek Philippe and Northern Summit properties. But I was Noelle Archer. I had been raised in a house of liars. I knew that asking a liar for the truth only gave them time to construct a better lie. No, I wouldn't ask. I would watch. I remembered his advice. Document everything. I took a screenshot of the anonymous email. I saved it to a hidden folder. If Jace Nolan was playing a game, I needed to figure out the rules before I decided if he was my partner or my opponent. Loretta thought she was fighting a war against a bitter stepdaughter and a poor carpenter. She had no idea she was standing on a chessboard, and the pawn she had been mocking was actually the king. And I needed to find out if the king was planning to sacrifice the queen to win. Carmen Hale called me on a Thursday morning with a voice that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. They responded. She said, "They want to settle." I sat up straighter in my office chair, my heart doing a traitorous little leap. "They are paying the $70,000? I asked. Carmen let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Not exactly. They are offering $10,000. They are calling it a goodwill gesture to help you get back on your feet. But there are strings attached, thick ones. They want a full release of claims, a non-disclosure agreement, and a face-to-face meeting, today." My grip tightened on the phone. $10,000? That was an insult. It was barely enough to cover the legal fees I had already incurred and the therapy I would probably need for the rest of my life. "Where?" I asked. "The Platinum Leaf Club," Carmen said. "Neutral ground. Or as neutral as a place with a $50,000 initiation fee can be. I will be there with you. Noelle, but I need you to know, this is a lowball offer. They are testing to see how desperate you are." "I am not desperate," I told her, staring at the spreadsheet on my monitor without seeing the numbers. "I am patient." I arrived at the Platinum Leaf Club an hour later. The valet looked at my 10-year-old sedan with the kind of disdain usually reserved for roadkill. But he took the keys. I walked into the lobby, the smell of old money, leather, mahogany, and silent judgment, hitting me instantly. Loretta was waiting in a private solarium at the back, overlooking the golf course. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored power suit that probably cost more than my car. My father sat next to her, shrinking into his oversized armchair like a child in trouble. When I sat down, Loretta didn't offer a hug. She signaled the waiter to pour tea. "Earl Grey," she said, sliding a delicate china cup toward me. "Your favorite." "It hasn't been my favorite since I was 12. "Loretta," I said, ignoring the cup, "let us skip the tea service. Why am I here?" Loretta sighed, a long, suffering sound. She clasped her hands on the table, displaying a diamond ring that caught the afternoon sun. "We are here because we are a family, Noelle, and families fight, but families also forgive." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that intimate, conspiratorial tone she used when she wanted to manipulate someone. "Look, I know you are angry. I know you think I'm the villain here, but you have to understand. I gave up everything for this family. I gave up my career in interior design to raise you and Piper. I managed this household. I made sure your father was taken care of." I looked at my father. He was staring intently at a potted fern in the corner, refusing to meet my eyes. "You didn't raise me." "Loretta," I said calmly, "I was 16 when you moved in. And you didn't give up your career. You were fired for billing clients for furniture you never delivered." Loretta's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "That is just gossip. The point is, Noelle, we are all under a lot of stress. The wedding is next week. Piper is fragile. We just want to unify the family image." "Unify the image," I repeated. "Is that why you stole my inheritance? To unify the image?" "We didn't steal it," Daniel mumbled. He finally looked at me, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for hidden microphones. "We reallocated it. We thought you would want to help your sister." I leaned in. "Dad, look at me. Do you remember the video?" Daniel flinched. He actually physically recoiled, his hand knocking against his saucer. The clatter was loud in the quiet room. "What video?" Loretta asked sharply, looking between us. Daniel wouldn't speak. He knew exactly which video. He knew I had the footage of him walking into the kitchen 10 years ago, seeing the violence, and doing nothing. His fear was palpable. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of the truth being digitized. "Let us focus on the solution," Loretta interrupted. Sensing she was losing control of the narrative, she reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek, heavy envelope. "We are prepared to offer you $10,000, she said. "Consider it seed money. For a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Whatever you need to feel secure." I stared at the envelope. It was a bribe. A cheap, pathetic bribe. "And in exchange?" I asked. Loretta smiled, triumphant. "In exchange, you will join us at the Winter Radiance Gala on Saturday. It is the pre-wedding celebration at the Ice Crown Pavilion. 300 guests, press, influencers." She paused for effect. "We want you to come up on stage during the toasts. We want you to take the microphone, stand next to Piper, and tell everyone that the rumors of a rift are false. Tell them you are so proud to support your sister's dream wedding. And then, we want you to sign this waiver in front of the family lawyer, privately, in the green room." "So you want me to lie?" I said. "You want me to tell 300 people that I'm happy you looted my trust fund?" "Noelle," Loretta said, her voice dripping with poisonous honey, "I am asking you to be the bigger person. You have always been the strong one. Piper, she is soft. She needs protection. You can handle the world. You can handle a little unfairness if it means saving your sister's happiness. Being the strong one means swallowing your pride for the greater good. That is what love is." I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. "You're the strong one." That was the sentence she had used to justify every neglect, every insult, every time I was pushed aside for Piper. Because I didn't break. She assumed I didn't feel. Just then, the glass doors opened and Piper burst in. She was wearing a white faux fur coat and holding her phone on a gimbal. She looked frantic. "Mom! The people from Snow V's Nature are asking for the final guest list. They need to know if the family unity angle is locked. If it is not, they might pull the sponsorship for the honeymoon ski trip." She stopped when she saw me. "Oh, you are here." I looked at Piper. She wasn't worried about me. She wasn't worried about our relationship. She was worried about a brand deal. Her entire wedding was a house of cards built on sponsorships and stolen money. If the family unity narrative crumbled, the sponsors would flee. This was it. This was the leverage. I looked back at Loretta. She was watching me, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to be the good girl who took the hit so the golden child could shine. "Tell me about the gala," I said softly. Loretta blinked, surprised by my sudden compliance. "Oh, well, it is at the Ice Crown Pavilion. Obviously. Saturday night, 6 o'clock cocktails, 7 o'clock dinner. The press wall is at the entrance. The toasts are at 8:30, right after the main course." "And the tech setup?" I asked. "Who is running the microphones? The screens?" "Gavin hired a top-tier AV team." Piper chimed in, scrolling on her phone. Massive LED screens behind the stage for a slideshow of me and Gavin growing up. It is going to be cinematic. Cinematic, I repeated. I looked at the envelope on the table. $10,000. A waiver. A lie. I reached out and put my hand on the envelope. I will do it, I said. Loretta let out a breath she had been holding. She clapped her hands together. Oh, Noelle. I knew you would make the right choice. I knew you loved us. I will be there on Saturday, I said, standing up. I will go on stage. I will say exactly what needs to be said. I didn't take the envelope. I left it on the table. See you at the gala, I said. I walked out of the club, past the valet, past the golf course. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just agreed to walk into the lion's den, but Loretta had made a fatal mistake. She invited me onto the stage. She gave me a microphone, and she told me exactly where the screens were. I drove straight to my apartment. Jace was there, sitting on my couch with Carmen. The air in the room was thick with tension. Carmen looked like she had swallowed a lemon when I told her what I had done. You agreed to the waiver? Carmen asked, horrified. Noelle, legally, that is suicide. If you step on that stage and admit fault or claim it was a misunderstanding, we lose the fraud case. We lose everything. I didn't sign anything yet, I said, pacing the small living room. I told them I would sign it in the green room after the toast. Jace was quiet. He was watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He was wearing his work boots, but his posture was that of the man I had seen in the park, the man who bought distressed assets. You are planning something, Jace said. It wasn't a question. I stopped pacing. They want a show. Jace, they have a massive LED screen. They have press. They have sponsors who are terrified of bad PR. They want me to tell a story. I looked at him. I am going to tell a story, just not the one they wrote. Carmen rubbed her temples. You want to play the video? At the gala? Noelle, that is nuclear. They will sue you for defamation. They will sue you for emotional distress. Let them sue, I said. The truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And I have the video, I have the emails, I have the bank records. Jace stood up. He walked over to me. Do you know who owns the Ice Crown Pavilion? He asked quietly. I looked at him. I knew. I had the anonymous email, but I hadn't confronted him yet. Northern Summit Properties, I said. Jace didn't flinch. He nodded. Correct. And you are Northern Summit Properties, I said. Carmen dropped her pen. Excuse me? Jace ignored her. He kept his eyes on mine. We closed the deal this morning. The paperwork went through an hour ago. Technically, as of noon today, I own the venue where your sister is having her party. My breath caught in my throat. You own it? I own the building, the land, and the AV system. Jace said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card, a master access key. He held it out to me. If you do this, Jace said, his voice low and serious, there is no going back. You burn the bridge, and you salt the earth. You will humiliate them in front of everyone they care about. It is not just justice, it is vengeance. He pressed the key card into my hand. The question is, Noelle, if you have the chance to not just get your money back, but to show the world who they really are, do you dare? I looked at the plastic card in my hand. I thought about the $10,000. I thought about Loretta's reconciliation tea. I thought about my father turning away from the camera 10 years ago. I closed my fingers around the key. I dare, I whispered. Jace smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Then let us get to work, he said. We have a show to produce. The 48 hours leading up to the Winter Radiance Gala were not measured in minutes, but in heartbeats and data packets. While Loretta and Piper were busy curating a fairy tale, I was busy constructing a guillotine. Carmen Hale was a force of nature. Once she had the scent of blood in the water. She didn't sleep. She turned her office into a war room, covering the mahogany desk with stacks of subpoenaed documents that painted a damning picture of the Archer family finances. Look at this. Noelle, she said, sliding a document across the desk. It was dated 3 months ago. I picked it up. It was a contract with Lumina Couture, the bridal designer. They put down a $20,000 deposit for the dresses before they even touched your trust fund, Carmen explained. Her eyes tired but sharp. They were leveraged to the hilt. They were spending money they didn't have, banking on the fact that they could raid your account to cover the deficit before the checks bounced. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was premeditated financial survival. She pulled out another sheet, and here's the sponsorship agreement for the honeymoon. It has a clawback clause. If the wedding is canceled, or if there is significant reputational damage to the brand, the Archers owe the travel agency $15,000 plus legal fees. They built a castle on quicksand, I whispered. And we are about to turn on the hose, Carmen finished grimly. While Carmen handled the paper trail, Jace handled the battlefield. He called me on Thursday afternoon and gave me an address in the financial district. Come to the 14th floor, he said. Suite 1400. I arrived to find a glass-walled office that smelled of new carpet and ambition. The sign on the door was discreet. Northern Summit Properties. When I walked into the conference room, I stopped dead. Sitting at the head of the table was Jace, but it wasn't the Jace I knew. Gone were the flannel shirt, the sawdust, and the work boots. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with the kind of precision that costs $5,000. His hair was styled back, on his wrist. The vintage Patek Philippe was no longer hidden. It gleamed under the recessed lighting. Carmen was sitting to his right, looking as stunned as I felt. Have a seat. Noelle, Jace said. His voice was different here. It was deeper, commanding. It was the voice of a man who moved millions with a phone call. I sat down, feeling like an imposter in my own life. The transfer of ownership is complete, Jace announced, looking at a stack of documents in front of him. As of this morning, Northern Summit Properties holds the deed to the Ice Crown Pavilion. The previous owners were drowning in debt. We bought the note, expedited the closing, and the title is ours. He looked at me, his eyes softening just a fraction. This means that on Saturday night, Loretta is not hosting a party in a public venue. She is hosting a party in my house, and I set the rules. He slid a heavy black folder toward me. Inside were the schematics of the pavilion's audio-visual system. We have a 24-hour window before the gala begins, Jace said. The previous management company is still technically staffing the event to avoid disrupting the wedding, but my tech team is going in tonight to do a system audit. That is our Trojan horse. I looked at the schematics. Lines and nodes connected the main stage to a server room in the basement. Loretta wants you on stage to apologize, Jace continued. She wants a show. We are going to give her one, but we need to make sure she cannot cut the feed when the script changes. The next day, Friday, was a blur of deception. I drove up to the Ice Crown Pavilion under the guise of the dutiful, repentant sister. Loretta had texted me a schedule. Final walkthrough at 2 p.m. Do not be late, and wear something appropriate, not your usual office clothes. I wore a soft pastel dress that made me look harmless. When I walked into the main ballroom, the scale of the deception hit me. It was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the snow-capped Rockies. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. A team of florists was arranging thousands of white roses into an archway. Loretta was in the center of it all, barking orders at a catering manager. When she saw me, she plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Noelle, you made it. She rushed over, gripping my shoulders. Now, remember, tomorrow night, you will stand right there. She pointed to a mark on the stage. The lighting will be flattering. You will say your piece. We will hug. And then the press can get their photos. Simple. I nodded, forcing myself to keep my hands relaxed at my sides. It looks beautiful. Loretta? It is perfect, she corrected me. Or it will be, once you do your part. While Loretta was distracted by a crisis involving the wrong shade of napkins, I slipped away. I'm just going to find the restroom, I told Piper, who was busy taking a selfie with an ice sculpture of a swan. I didn't go to the restroom. I went to the service corridor behind the kitchen. following the map Jace had memorized for me. The air grew colder as I moved away from the heated ballroom. I passed catering staff pushing carts, heads down, ignoring me. I found the door marked Server Control. It was ajar. Inside, a man in a black hoodie was typing furiously on a laptop connected to the main rack. He didn't look up when I entered. "We are in," he said. It was one of Jace's guys. I recognized him from the shop, though I had never seen him touch a computer before. "The primary feed is rerouted," he explained, pointing to a blinking green light. "When they cue the slideshow of Piper's childhood photos, it will run from their laptop, but we have installed a hardware override." He handed me a small, black remote. It looked like a car key fob. "Button A is their feed," he said. "Button B is ours. It is hardwired. Even if they unplug their laptop, even if they cut the Wi-Fi, our signal comes directly from the server in the basement. As long as the building has power, you have the screen." I closed my hand around the remote. It felt cold and heavy. I left the server room and tried to find my way back to the ballroom, but I took a wrong turn in the labyrinthine hallways. I found myself standing in front of a heavy steel door. A blast of Arctic air was leaking from the bottom. I pushed it open. It was the ice storage room. Floor-to-ceiling shelves were stacked with bags of ice. Massive, clear blocks of ice for the sculptures were sitting on pallets, waiting to be carved. The cold hit me instantly, biting through my thin dress. I stood there, paralyzed. The smell of frozen water, metallic and sharp, transported me back 10 years. Dad is just going for ice. That was the lie that started it all. He went for ice, and he left me in hell. He came back, saw the flames, and chose to warm his hands by the fire rather than pull me out. I stared at the blocks of ice. They were perfectly clear, flawless, just like the life Loretta had tried to build. Beautiful, cold, and hard enough to crush anyone who got in the way. But ice melts. A hand touched my shoulder. I gasped, spinning around. It was Jace. He had come in through the loading dock entrance. He was back in his work clothes, blending in with the setup crew, but his eyes were the eyes of the CEO. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at the ice, then at him. "I am fine. I hate the cold." Jace reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny earpiece. "Put this in tomorrow. I will be on the other end. I will be in the control booth. If you freeze, if you forget what to say, I will be right there in your ear." He pressed the earpiece into my hand, his fingers closing over mine. "You are not alone in that kitchen anymore. Noelle," he said fiercely, "you are in my building, you are on my turf, and we are going to burn this place down with the truth." I nodded, taking a deep breath of the freezing air. "I am ready." The rest of the day and the next morning dissolved into a montage of contrasting realities. In the bridal suite, Loretta was steaming Piper's rehearsal dress, fussing over hemlines. Piper was recording a TikTok, dancing with her bridesmaids, captioning it, "7 days until I say I do. Best family ever." Gavin was in the lobby, shaking hands with the videographer, signing an addendum that gave them rights to film the emotional family reconciliation. Meanwhile, in a darkened van in the parking lot, Carmen was finalizing the affidavit for the district attorney. She was organizing the printed bank statements into neat, devastating stacks. In the control booth, Jace was personally testing the audio levels. He was syncing the security footage, the grainy, black and white video of Loretta's slap, to the massive 4,000-pixel LED wall. He typed in the command lines to lock out the venue's default system. And in my hotel room, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my laptop screen. I had the video paused. It was the frame right before the slap. Loretta's hand was raised. Her face was twisted in a snarl that the world had never seen. My father was absent from the frame, but I knew he was just seconds away. I touched the screen. For 10 years, I had been afraid of that hand. I had flinched every time she moved too fast. I had lowered my voice every time she entered a room. I had let her steal my money, my history, and my father because I was terrified of the chaos she could unleash. But the chaos was already here. She had brought it upon herself. I closed the laptop. I picked up the small black remote control Jace's tech had given me. I clicked the button. Click. Tomorrow, I whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow. That hand won't cover anything anymore. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the ice-crowned pavilion glowed on the hill like a beacon. It looked impenetrable. It looked majestic. But I had the key, I had the code, and I had the detonator. I went to sleep without setting an alarm. I knew I wouldn't need one. My body was vibrating with the frequency of a coming storm. The girl who waited for her dad to come back with the ice was gone. The woman who was about to shatter the glass house had taken her place. The Winter Radiance Gala was a study in aggressive perfection. The ballroom of the ice-crowned pavilion was bathed in a deep sapphire blue light that made the skin of the guests look porcelain and expensive. Massive sculptures of swans and castles, carved from crystal-clear ice, dripped imperceptibly into hidden reservoirs, counting down the time until they vanished. The air smelled of white lilies and ozone, a scent that was crisp, sterile, and overwhelmingly cold. I stood near the edge of the velvet rope, my hand clutching my beaded clutch so tightly that the edges of the folded waver inside dug into my palm. Inside my ear, a tiny bud hummed with static silence. Jace was there, listening, waiting. Piper was in the center of the room, twirling in a silver cocktail dress that caught the light like a disco ball. She was holding her phone up, live streaming to her 100,000 followers. Hey guys, we are moments away from the big speeches. My heart is literally pounding. Look at this venue. Best night of my life. Her voice was shrill, manic with the need to be envied. Loretta materialized beside me. She moved like a shark in a silk lagoon, her gold gown shimmering as she leaned in close. She didn't look at me. She kept her smile fixed on a photographer across the room. When you go up there, she whispered, her lips barely moving. Remember the script. If you deviate one word, Noelle, if you stutter, I will come up there and correct you. And you know how much I hate public scenes. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. I know the lines, Loretta, I said. Good, she said, patting my arm with a touch that felt like a pinch. Because this isn't just about the money anymore. It is about survival. Do not make me the enemy tonight. She swept away to greet a local councilman, leaving a trail of heavy floral perfume in her wake. I looked toward the bar. My father, Daniel, was standing there, gripping a tumbler of scotch. He had been drinking steadily since we arrived. His face was flushed, a patchy red spreading across his cheeks that clashed with his tuxedo. He looked like a man trying to drown a conscience that had learned to swim a long time ago. I watched as he signaled the bartender. The bar was slammed. Guests were 3 deep, clamoring for the signature blue cocktails. The bartender, a young guy looking overwhelmed, shook his head and pointed to an empty silver bucket. We are out of ice, sir, I heard the bartender say over the swell of the string quartet. The runners are bringing more up from the basement. My father's face twitched. The impatience of the addict, mixed with the nervous energy of a man who didn't want to stand still and think, took over. I will get it, Daniel snapped, loud enough for me to hear from 10 feet away. I will go down to the auxiliary freezer in the back hallway. It is faster than waiting for your staff. I felt the blood drain from my face. I will go get the ice. The phrase hung in the air, suspended like a guillotine blade. It was the same sentence, the exact same excuse. 10 years ago, he had walked out of a kitchen to get ice and left me to be battered. Now, he was walking out of a ballroom to get ice, leaving me to be paraded on stage. He turned, stumbling slightly, and headed for the service exit. I took a step to follow him, but a hand clamped around my bicep. Not you, Loretta hissed. She had circled back, her radar for my father's incompetence pinging instantly. He is just drunk. Let him be useful. You and I need to touch up your makeup. You look pale. She didn't wait for an answer. She dragged me in the opposite direction, toward a small VIP preparation room situated just off the main stage. It was a holding pen for the talent before the speeches. Loretta shoved me inside and kicked the door shut with her heel. The noise of the gala cut off instantly, replaced by the heavy silence of the small, windowless room. The space was cramped, dominated by a long vanity table lined with blindingly bright bulbs. Mirrors covered every wall, reflecting us back at ourselves, infinite Lorettas, infinite Noels. She let go of my arm and spun on me. The mask of the gracious hostess fell away. Her face twisted into a snarl that I knew better than my own reflection. "You are vibrating," she accused, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "I can see it. You are planning something." "I am just nervous," I said, backing up until my hips hit the edge of the vanity. "Don't lie to me." She stepped into my personal space, her breath hot and smelling of champagne. "I saw the way you looked at him. You think because you have a lawyer now, you are safe? Let me tell you something, you little ungrateful brat. If you ruin tonight, if you embarrass Piper in front of these sponsors, I will destroy you." I stood my ground, though my knees were shaking. "How?" I asked. "By stealing more of my money?" "By finishing what I started 10 years ago," she whispered, leaning in until her nose almost touched mine. "I will go to the press. I will tell them about your episodes. I will tell them you are bipolar, violent, dangerous. I will recount the night of Piper's 13th birthday in such vivid detail that no employer will ever hire you again. I will paint you as the jealous, psychotic sister who tried to hurt a child. And who will they believe? The wealthy, grieving mother, or the single, bitter woman with no friends?" Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock opening. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a parasite. "Do you ever get tired?" I asked Sel. She blinked. "What?" "Do you ever get tired of eating what you didn't kill?" I continued, my voice gaining strength. "You spent my mother's money. You spent my father's retirement. Now you are spending the sponsor's money. You have never earned $1 in your life. Loretta, you just move from host to host, sucking them dry until you have to find a new vein." Loretta's eyes went wide. The insult hit its mark. It stripped away the veneer of sacrificing mother and exposed the grifter underneath. "Shut up," she hissed. "No," I said. "You call me a guest in this family? You are the guest, Loretta, and the bill is due." She screamed. It was a guttural sound of pure rage. She lunged at me. Her hands grabbed my shoulders, her nails digging into the fabric of my dress, piercing the skin. She shoved me backward. I slammed into the vanity table, my lower back hitting the edge hard. My hand flailed out to catch my balance and hit a tray of champagne flutes that had been left for us. Smash. The sound of shattering glass was deafening in the small room. Crystal shards exploded across the floor. The champagne foamed over the white tile. I gasped, pain shooting up my spine. Loretta didn't let go. She pinned me against the mirror, her face contorted, her hand raised to strike. "I will teach you your place," she screamed. And then, the door handle turned. The door swung open. My father stood there. He was holding a bucket of ice. He had come back because he had forgotten his phone on the vanity table. I could see it sitting right next to my elbow. He froze. The scene was a grotesque reenactment, the broken glass on the floor, Loretta pinning me against the counter, her hand raised high, ready to slap, my face pale, my hair mussed. It was the kitchen all over again, the exact same geometry of violence. Daniel dropped the ice bucket. Plastic cubes and half-melted slush spilled across the carpet, mixing with the champagne and the glass. Loretta froze. Her hand was still in the air. She turned her head slowly to look at him. "Daniel?" she breathed, her voice dropping instantly into that fake, weeping register she used so well. "Oh, Daniel, thank God. She went crazy again. She attacked me. I was just trying to hold her." "Stop," my father said. It wasn't a shout. It was a croak. He looked at Loretta's hand, still gripping my shoulder. He looked at the fear in my eyes. Not fear of her, but fear for him. He looked at the scene, and for the first time in 10 years, the editing software in his brain failed. He couldn't cut the clip. He couldn't look away. The reality was staring him in the face. "She didn't attack you," Daniel whispered. He looked at his wife with a dawn of horror. "You are holding her down." Loretta snatched her hands back as if I were on fire. She smoothed her dress, laughing nervously. "You didn't see the beginning. Daniel, she was throwing things. She is unstable, just like that night." I straightened up, brushing her hands off me. I didn't look at Loretta. I looked straight at my father. He looked old, under the harsh vanity lights. He looked gray and withered. He was looking at me, and I saw the apology forming in his eyes. I saw the guilt rising like bile. I took a step toward him, crunching on the glass. "Well?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a razor. He looked at me, confused. "Are you going to go back for more ice, Dad?" I asked. "Or are you going to stay in the room this time?" Daniel swallowed hard. His hands were shaking at his sides. He looked at Loretta, who was now sobbing, trying to regain control of the scene. "Daniel, please, she is lying. Get her out of here." My father didn't move. He didn't comfort her. He just stood there, staring at the broken glass, seeing the ghosts of his own cowardice. I stepped past Loretta. I walked to the door where my father stood. He didn't know. Loretta didn't know. High up in the corner of the room, nestled in the shadows of the molding, a small black dome camera blinked with a rhythmic red pulse. They thought this was a private family moment. They thought this was another secret to be buried in the vault of Archer family shame. But inside my ear, Jace's voice came through, clear and cold as the winter wind. "I got it," Jace said. "We have the feed, audio and video, crystal clear." I looked at my father one last time. "The show is starting." "Dad," I said, "you might want to find a seat." I walked out of the prep room and back into the blue-lit hallway, leaving them in the wreckage of their own making. I could hear Loretta's frantic whispers behind me, trying to spin the story, trying to patch the cracks. But it was too late. The ice was already melting, and the flood was coming. Loretta dragged us out of the shadows of the hallway and into the blinding glare of the main ballroom. She hooked one arm through mine and the other through Daniel's, creating a visual chain of custody that looked like affection, but felt like a prisoner transport. Her grip on my bicep was bruising, hitting the exact spot she had tried to strike moments ago. We marched up the stairs to the stage. The applause was polite at first, rippling through the crowd of 300 guests, then swelling as the spotlight hit us. I blinked against the harsh white light. Below me, a sea of faces looked up, a blur of sequins, tuxedos, and the glowing rectangles of smartphones held aloft. Piper was standing at the podium, looking like a snow princess in her silver dress. When she saw us, her face lit up with a relief so genuine it almost made me pity her. She truly believed the lie. She thought we had hugged it out in the back. She thought the check had been written and the waiver signed. Loretta released my arm to grab the microphone from the stand. She stepped forward, blocking me from the audience's direct line of sight, her voice booming through the massive speakers. "Welcome, everyone! Welcome to the Winter Radiance Gala." She paused for applause, flashing a smile that was all teeth and adrenaline. "We have had a few rumors flying around this week, haven't we? Families are complicated, and the Archers are no exception, but I am thrilled to announce that love has won. My beautiful stepdaughter, Noelle, is here with us tonight to put all those silly misunderstandings to rest." She turned to me, her eyes manic, daring me to deviate. "Come here, sweetie. Tell everyone how happy you are for your sister." She thrust the microphone into my hand. It was heavy, cold metal. In my other hand, I held the crumpled waiver she had forced upon me in the prep room. I stepped up to the podium. The room went quiet. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. I could see the red, live indicators on the cameras of the documentary crew Gavin had hired. I saw the influencers in the front row, their phones steady, waiting for the soundbite. Loretta leaned in close, pretending to fix my hair. "Sign it," she hissed in my ear. "Do it now, or you are dead." I looked at Piper. She was beaming, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. I looked at my father. He was standing a few feet back, staring at his shoes, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad. And then, the house lights flickered. Once, twice. It was a subtle disruption, barely noticeable to the guests. But to me, it was a thunderclap. It was Jace. The signal. The bridge was burned. I looked out at the crowd. I didn't look at Loretta. 10 years ago, I said, my voice steady and amplified across the cavernous hall, my father left the house to buy a bag of ice. The room rippled with confusion. This wasn't the toast they were expecting. Loretta froze, her smile twitching. He walked out the door. I continued, tightening my grip on the microphone, and he left me in the kitchen. Tonight, you are all going to see what actually happened when he left that room, and you are going to see what just happened 5 minutes ago when he tried to do it again. I pressed the small black button on the remote concealed in my palm. Behind me, the massive 40-foot LED screen that was supposed to show a montage of Piper's childhood abruptly cut to black. A second later, it exploded into light. Grainy, black and white footage filled the wall. It was the kitchen from 10 years ago. The timestamp in the corner read, October 14th, 2014. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The image was undeniable. There was Loretta, younger but unmistakable, shoving a 20-year-old me into the granite counter. The audience watched in stunned silence as she slapped me across the face, the force of the blow snapping my head back. Loretta let out a strangled cry. "Cut it!" she screamed, lunging for the AV technician at the side of the stage. "Turn it off!" But the technician held his hands up, helpless. The feed wasn't coming from him. On the screen, the video split. A second window opened next to the first. This footage was high definition, sharp, and in color. It was the prep room, 5 minutes ago. The crowd watched as Loretta pinned me against the vanity table. They saw the champagne flutes shatter. They saw her face twisted in a mask of pure, unfiltered hate. And then, they saw the door open. They saw Daniel walk in with the ice bucket. They saw him freeze. They saw him look at his wife assaulting his daughter, and they saw him do nothing. The silence in the ballroom broke. It didn't break with applause. It broke with the sound of 300 people realizing they were witnessing a crime. I could hear the murmurs turning into shouts. "Oh my God. Is that live? That is abuse. That is straight-up assault." I looked down at the influencers in the front row. Their thumbs were flying across their screens. The chat boxes on their live streams were scrolling so fast they were a blur of emojis and shocked comments. Domestic violence. Cancel the wedding. Who is the mom? Piper turned around to look at the screen. She stared at the image of her mother striking me. Her hands went to her mouth. The color drained from her face until she matched her dress. The fairy tale was dissolving in real time. Loretta lunged for me. She grabbed the microphone stand, trying to wrestle it away. "It is fake!" she screamed, her voice cracking, echoing horribly through the speakers. "It is deep fake! She made it up! She is jealous! She is trying to ruin my daughter's wedding!" But her voice was thin against the weight of the evidence looming behind her. Then, from the back of the room, a voice cut through the chaos like a gavel. "It is not a fake. Loretta." The spotlight swung toward the entrance. Jace was walking down the center aisle. He was no longer the dusty carpenter the archers had mocked. He strode with the predatory grace of a corporate shark, dressed in a suit that whispered power. The vintage Patek Philippe on his wrist caught the light as he adjusted his cuffs. He walked up the stairs to the stage. Ignoring the security guards who were too confused to stop him, he stood next to me, placing a hand on the small of my back, a shield. He took a handheld microphone from his pocket. "My name is Jace Nolan," he announced, his voice calm and authoritative. "I am the CEO of Northern Summit Properties." He looked at Loretta, who was staring at him with her mouth open, trying to reconcile the handyman she despised with the man standing before her. "As of 12 o'clock this afternoon," Jace continued, I am the owner of the Ice Crown Pavilion. I own this stage. I own the screens. And I own the building you are standing in." He turned to the crowd. "Northern Summit Properties has a strict morality clause for our venue contracts," he said. "We do not do business with individuals involved in domestic violence, and we certainly do not host events funded by financial fraud." He looked at Piper, then at Gavin. "Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. The wedding is canceled. You have 1 hour to vacate my premises." The room erupted. It was pandemonium. The press photographers were flashing frantically. Gavin looked like he was about to vomit. Piper sank to her knees, her dress pooling around her like a melting glacier. Loretta looked around wildly. Seeing her social standing crumbling, "You cannot do this. We have a contract. We paid the deposit." "You paid the deposit with stolen money," a sharp female voice called out. Carmen Hale stepped out from the wings. She wasn't wearing a gala dress. She was wearing her court suit. She walked to center stage, holding a thick stack of documents. She didn't need a microphone. She projected her voice with the training of a litigator. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carmen said, holding up a bank statement, "what you are seeing on the screen now are the wire transfers from the Noel Archer Irrevocable Trust." The screen behind us changed again. The videos vanished, replaced by spreadsheets, rows and rows of highlighted numbers. $70,000, Carmen read aloud. "Stolen in structured withdrawals to avoid federal detection. Used to pay for the deposit on this room. Used to pay for the dress the bride is wearing." She held up another document. "And here's the sworn affidavit from the bank, confirming that Loretta Archer impersonated the beneficiary to authorize these transfers. And here are the emails where she attempts to bribe the wedding sponsors using funds that did not belong to her." The sponsors in the room, the florist, the travel agent, the dress designer, looked at each other in horror. They realized instantly that they had been paid with dirty money. They realized their brands were currently being associated with a fraudster on a viral live stream. Loretta let out a screech and tried to grab the papers from Carmen. "That is confidential. You cannot show that." Carmen sidestepped her easily. "It is public record now. Loretta, we filed it with the district attorney this morning." Loretta spun around to find Daniel. "Daniel, do something. Tell them we had permission." Everyone looked at Daniel. My father was standing alone near the edge of the stage. The spotlight found him. He looked small. He looked defeated. He looked at the screen, where the spreadsheet of his complicity was glowing in high definition. He looked at me. He saw the daughter he had failed. He saw the wife who had turned him into a criminal. "Daniel," Loretta pleaded, grabbing his lapels, "tell them it was a loan." Daniel looked at the microphone Jace held out to him. He took it with a shaking hand. He looked at the crowd. He opened his mouth to lie. He wanted to lie. It was his instinct. But then he looked at the screen again. He saw the timestamp. October 14th, 2014. He couldn't go back for ice this time. There was nowhere left to hide. "It wasn't a loan," Daniel whispered. "Speak up!" someone from the back shouted. Daniel closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, running down his flushed cheeks. "It wasn't a loan," he said, his voice breaking. "We took it. I watched her take it, and I let her do it because I was too weak to stop her." The confession hit Loretta like a physical blow. She staggered back, her hands flying to her hair. "No," she screamed. "You traitor! I did this for us. I did this for this family." She turned to the crowd, her arms wide, begging for validation. "I am a good mother," she shrieked, her voice tearing. "I sacrificed everything. She is the problem. Noel is the problem." But her voice was swallowed by the roar of the room. The booing started low and rose quickly. The guests were turning their backs. The camera crews were zooming in on her meltdown. The facade of the wealthy, perfect matriarch had shattered completely, leaving only a desperate, screaming woman on a stage that no longer belonged to her. I stood there, next to Jace, watching her unravel. I felt no triumph. I felt no joy. I just felt the immense, heavy relief of a burden finally being set down. Jace squeezed my hand. "It is over," he said softly. I looked at the screen one last time, at the frozen image of my father standing in the doorway with the ice bucket, and then I turned away. The ice had melted, and the archers were drowning in it. The ballroom was suspended in a vacuum of shocked silence, the kind that only exists in the split second after a guillotine blade drops and before the head hits the basket. The video screens behind us had gone black, but the images of my father's cowardice and my stepmother's violence were burned into the retinas of every person in the room. Carmen Hale did not let the silence stretch. She was a conductor, and this was her finale. She stepped forward, placing a sleek leather portfolio onto the podium. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed through the microphone. "We have a simple choice to make tonight," Carmen announced. Her voice was calm, the professional counterweight to the hysteria radiating from Loretta. "Inside this portfolio is a settlement agreement. It stipulates the immediate return of the $70,000 misappropriated from Noel Archer's trust, plus interest calculated at the maximum legal rate." She opened the folder, the pages rustling loudly. "It also requires the immediate resignation of Daniel and Loretta Archer as trustees. It requires a full audit of the remaining assets, and it requires a public admission of financial mismanagement." Carmen looked out at the audience, then turned her gaze to my father. "Option A is you sign this right now, in front of these witnesses. Option B is I hand the flash drive in my pocket to the district attorney's investigator, who is currently standing by the exit. If I do that, we move from civil litigation to criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and assault." The room erupted into low murmurs. I saw the representative from Lumina Couture standing near the front. He was on his phone, his face pale. He signaled to his team, and right there, in the middle of the chaos, they began dismantling the branding wall. They ripped down the banners with the designer's logo, rolling them up frantically. They didn't want their name in the background of the mugshots. The live stream chat on Piper's phone, which lay abandoned on the stage floor, was scrolling so fast it was a blur. The influencers who had been invited to hype the event were now treating it like a crime scene investigation. They had turned their cameras away from the decor and focused them entirely on Loretta. Drama of the year. Did she really steal the trust fund? Look at the dad. He looks guilty as sin. Daniel looked at the portfolio. He looked at the investigator by the door. Then he looked at me. For 10 years, I had waited for him to protect me. I had waited for him to stand between me and Loretta. He never did, but he was a survivor. He was a creature of comfort, and he realized with terrifying clarity that his comfort was about to end in a prison cell. "Give me the pen," Daniel said. His voice was weak, barely a whisper, but the microphone caught it. "Daniel!" Loretta screamed. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his tuxedo jacket. "You cannot sign that. You are admitting guilt. You are destroying us." Daniel shoved her off. It was the first time in his life I had ever seen him physically reject her. "I am not going to jail for you, Loretta," he snapped, his voice rising, cracking with panic. "I am not going to lose my license because you wanted a winter wonderland." He grabbed the pen from Carmen. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold it, but he scribbled his signature on the line. "It was her idea," Daniel blurted out, looking desperate as he handed the folder back to Carmen. "She set up the transfers. She forged the verbal consent logs. I just didn't stop her." The bus had been backed over Loretta, and her husband was driving it. Loretta stood alone in the center of the stage. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, but she found only judgment. The guests she had tried so hard to impress were recoiling from her. "I raised her," Loretta shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "I took her in when her mother died. I fed her. I clothed her. And this is the thanks I get? A public execution?" "Ms. Archer," Carmen said, cutting through the hysterics, "we need your signature as well. Or do you prefer the police?" "I am not signing anything," Loretta yelled. "You cannot touch me. That money was for the family. I have rights." From the shadows of the wings, a man in a gray suit stepped forward. I recognized him immediately. He was the risk officer from the bank where the trust was held. Carmen had invited him as a VIP guest. "Mrs. Archer," the banker said, his voice flat. "Given the confession we just heard from your co-trustee and the evidence presented, the bank has enacted an immediate freeze on all joint accounts associated with your name. Your credit cards have been suspended as of 5 minutes ago." Loretta went still. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking waxen and old under the harsh stage lights. The threat of jail hadn't broken her. The threat of social embarrassment hadn't broken her. But the money? The realization that she couldn't buy her way out of this room? That broke her. She looked at her empty hands. She realized that without the money she had siphoned from others, she was nothing. She was just a woman screaming in a rented hall. Piper, who had been kneeling on the floor sobbing, suddenly scrambled up. She ran to me, grabbing my hands. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her face. "Noelle, please," she begged, her voice high and childish. "Please stop this. You are ruining everything. It is my wedding. I just wanted one day. I just wanted to be loved." I looked at my sister. I saw the product of 10 years of Loretta's manipulation. Piper wasn't evil, but she was complicit. She had eaten the fruit of the poisonous tree and never asked where it came from because it tasted sweet. I pulled my hands away gently. "You wanted a wedding." "Piper," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "but you let Mom pay for it with money that belonged to a dead woman. My mother." Piper flinched. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I'm not going to pay for your fantasy anymore. If you want to be loved, Piper, stop performing for a camera and start living in reality." I pointed to her phone on the floor. "Delete the video," I said. "Go online. Tell your followers the truth. Tell them who paid for this party. Then, and only then, can we talk about being sisters." Piper stared at me, then looked at her mother, who was now arguing with the security guards. She looked back at her phone. She didn't pick it up. She just covered her face and wept. I turned back to the podium. Lying on the polished wood was the waiver, the document Loretta had tried to force me to sign, the piece of paper that would have erased my history and absolved them of their sins. I picked it up. The room went silent again. Everyone watched. I could feel their anticipation. Did they think I would sign it? Did they think I would show mercy? I held the paper up to the light. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I asked, looking at Daniel. "You wanted me to be the good daughter, the quiet daughter. You wanted me to sign away my pain so you could sleep at night." I took the paper in both hands. Rip. The sound was sharp and final. I tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths. I let the pieces fall from my hand. They fluttered down like confetti, landing on the stage floor, mixing with the shards of ice from the earlier sculpture. I looked at my father. He was slumped in a chair the security team had brought him, his head in his hands. "Daniel," I said. He looked up. The use of his first name hit him harder than a slap. He winced. "From today on," I said, my voice devoid of anger, devoid of sadness, just empty and clean. "We are no longer family. We are two adults involved in a legal dispute, and that part is being handled. Do not call me. Do not email me. Speak to my lawyer." I turned away from him. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing he could say that would fix the last 10 years. Jace was waiting for me at the edge of the stage. He hadn't interfered. He hadn't tried to be the hero. He had just held the space for me to save myself. He reached out his hand. "Ready?" he asked. I looked at the chaos behind me, the sponsors fleeing, the crying sister, the broken stepmother, the father who was a stranger. "I am ready," I said. Jace took my hand. "Come on, my car is out back." We walked down the stairs, leaving the stage to the ruins of the Archer dynasty. As we walked toward the exit, we had to pass the main bar. The event was effectively over, and the staff was already starting to clean up. A young bartender was lifting a heavy silver bucket of melted ice. He moved to the service sink and tipped it over. Crash, rattle, hiss. The sound of hundreds of ice cubes hitting the metal sink echoed through the emptying hall. It was the sound of a party ending. It was the sound of a lie dissolving. I paused for a second, listening to it. 10 years ago, my father left for ice and never came back. He stayed out in the cold, and he tried to freeze me out with him. But as I walked through the double doors and into the crisp, clean night air of Colorado, holding the hand of a man who fought with me, not against me, I realized the truth. I wasn't the one left in the cold anymore. I had walked out of the ice house, and I was never, ever looking back. Thank you so much for listening to Noelle's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop your city or country in the comments below, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help us share this story with even more people. Your support means the world to us.